everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week, you're in for a wonderful treat because I am joined by a wonderful man, the one and only Marcus Rader from Hostaway. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me here again. It's always a pleasure.
It is a real pleasure to see you and to talk to you. And I was reminiscing about the last time we spoke on the Accommodation Show. And that was quite a number of years ago. And I feel that for us, it was kind of I felt like I was in my infancy as a business owner. I think it was towards a very, very start of the Accommodation Show. But I feel you might feel that way as well, because I don't know. Did you raise your first round at that stage, or were you no? You hadn't. You hadn't done the big one. The big one was only
No, that was just 2 years ago in 2023.
So now we're here. We're here about 4 years later, and we're going to have another chat about what you've been up to, the phenomenal success that you've had with Hostaway. Personally as well, I know that you've had a lot of changes. A lot of things have changed. The last time we talked, you were in Canada, and now you're living over in Europe. But Marcus, can you do me a favor? Can you introduce yourself to everyone? Let everybody know that doesn't know who you are, where you're from, and what you get up to.
Absolutely. So my name is Marcus Rader. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Hostaway. We're a PMS or vacation rental software. We're one of the few tech companies in the world that managed to become a unicorn in under 10 years. And I grew up in Finland, but I studied a bit in Poland at SGH, and I've lived in Amsterdam and Barcelona. And the last 9 years, I lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. But the last 5 winters I've been spending in Florida, where we have, I would say that's our biggest single customer base. And last fall, I moved with my daughter and my wife to Poland because we needed a base in Europe. Partly because of the business, we're expanding here and it's going really well, but also my parents are getting old and they are both in Europe. It was becoming harder and harder to manage time zones as such. Yeah, I'm here now in southern France, in Cannes, waiting for the film festival to open tomorrow.
So are you going to be on the red carpet?
No. We looked into it, but you need to be in the movie industry to actually get tickets.
Yeah, right.
The only workaround is if you're active in a local recognized movie organization, let's say the movie club of some big city, and then they write a recommendation, you might be able to get a poor man's ticket. But yeah, if you're not full-time working in the movie industry, it's very hard to get in.
They won't have you. Maybe that's a call sign for you. Maybe you need to get yourself a Netflix show or a TV show and get yourself on the carpet next year. Put that as another little target for you.
That would be really cool.
I think it would be cool. I think it would be very, very good. I think over here, actually, what is it, the 12th? I think in a few days' time, we've got a reality TV show coming out, which is based on luxury experiences or luxury short-term rentals. Think sort of from the previews that I've seen, sort of below deck sort of style, demanding guests and that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But I think maybe you could do like a Facebook type one, all the stories of how you came to be.
Yeah. Or we can do it right now.
Yeah, that's right. Let's get into it. Look, folks, Marcus is an incredible person because even though he's had tremendous success and just got busier and busier with his business, he's been very authentic and true to who he was when I first caught up with him so many years ago. And he's exactly the same person now. So I can send him a text message or a WhatsApp message pretty much at any time. He'll respond within a few hours and give me his time, even though I know it's ever more precious and valuable now. So I'm saying this as a testament to who you are. And as a founder, I think that might be something which is important, is to kind of to stay true to yourself and to have a certain way of running a business. How important, because you'll know a lot of other CEOs as well, and you'll know how people kind of operate at a kind of, I would say, a higher level. Do you think that's something that's conscious for you? Do you think it's important? And in terms of your interaction with people within the industry?
I think there's some of the advice that I got in the early stages, even when it was just an idea, was that you can't build a business for money. You have to build it with a passion. And that's something that I still, my passion is travel and real estate. Just in the last month, I've been to Rome, Athens, Helsinki, Warsaw, and now Cannes in southern France. And I keep traveling. Last year I traveled 255 days. I stayed just this year. I've stayed 3 months in my client's property, and it's always amazing to see. I love our customers. I love what they're doing, and I'm very open in communicating with them. I often give out my phone number and say reach out at any time. People reach out for different reasons, and I always wanna hear their stories. At Hostaway, we're also, well, I hope the staff isn't listening, and I hope our plans don't change. But we're planning to launch finally a travel program. So if you go on vacation somewhere and you decide to take out a client for lunch or go and visit their premises, then we'll not only pay for the lunch, we'll pay for the whole trip, even though it's your vacation. So that's what we're launching soon. Of course, that's the life I've been living now for 10 years. So for me, it's not a big change, but yeah, there's also the other side is that you gotta have an interest in money, because I see a lot of companies fail, even though they're passionate and they're excited about what they're doing. But you gotta keep track of the money, because once the money runs out, that's when the music stops. That's when it's no longer fun. That's when you have to lay off people, the people who aren't doing anything, but the people who are actually great employees. You have to lay them off, if, or they might even leave if they don't get paid.
Hmm.
So money is incredibly important for running a business. It's the number one metric that any business has. So I don't fully buy the argument that you shouldn't be interested in money. I think that's the number one focus you should have when trying to build a business.
Well, that's right. I mean, like, you want to have fun, right? And have a bunch of principles that you're trying to follow as a business owner. But if you're broke, it's obviously not going to work. How do you strike the balance, though, Marcus? Because if you can be so focused on the money side of it to the detriment of everything else that the business actually stands for, and the business shouldn't really stand for money, even though it's the most important thing.
Well, I think the fun aspect is good, but it's a lot of a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, they focus too much on the fun stuff. They talk about they think about their branding and nice advertising campaigns and then cool features to put in the product. Unfortunately, none of that really helps much. Usually it might give you some advantage at some point, but most of the big breakthroughs and developments will come from either the very boring things or the very painful things. So when you look at your task list and you got 100 items, and that is one item that's so big you don't know anything about it, and it's going to be extremely painful to even understand what is this task about. That's probably the one you should be focusing on, because the easy ones, they will solve themselves. I used to keep a list of items I had to do in a notebook, or in a file on the computer. And at some point, I think it was year 6, I just stopped looking at it. And then I set a calendar reminder 6 months now from now. And then I looked at it, and it turns out that the things that really mattered, they got done without me looking at my list. And a lot of the items that didn't get done, they were not important. You knew 6 months later that good, I didn't spend my time on that, because that would have been a waste of time. Yeah, that's a tip I've been using to lower stress, because things that are important, they tend to pop up over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you? Tell me about the stress part. So lowering stress by not looking at the list of tasks.
Yeah, exactly. So because as the company grows, it's more important. This is one of the things with the startup community that I actually really don't like, is how you get people on the stage like me, and we come from the other side, from the success side, but we're talking to people who are trying to become successful, who are trying to start a business. And when I say trying to start, it can take 10 years. You might work in a business for 10 years and might still be a failing business. It's when it's successful, you know it. When it's on the track to be successful, you know it. But if you don't have either one of those things, then it's a failing business. That's just a fact. You might get hit by a bus and the business is done. It's that simple. But they put these people on a pedestal, and then they come and talk about all these motivational items, like you should do yoga at sunrise, and you should eat a certain way, and you should meditate, and you should stay true to your values and focus on the vision, and all of that is bullshit, because that's not what it takes to make a company successful. That is actually the reward you get after the success. You get to
Hmm.
do the yoga.
Yeah.
But at least for me, I'd say coffee, cigarettes, and alcohol were the main drivers. Because when you're waking up at 4 in the morning to do a call, and then the last call is at 2 a.m., and all you do in between is just work, work, work for 7 days a week for many years in a row, there's no way you could fit in some yoga there. Like that. That doesn't help. That doesn't help with the business either. What really helps is sitting in front of your laptop and getting things done. And whatever takes you through that helps. But if you can do it at the same time while working, like I'm drinking coffee right now, like, well, then it's double productive.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm a bit surprised that you've led me into exactly where I kind of wanted to go, and that was talking about success. Can you run people through kind of the scale of where Hostaway is now? And I know that you said that at unicorn level now. How many employees are you guys at, and that sort of thing? And then the second part of that question is referring back to what you're saying before. You said you'll know success when you see it, or you'll know it's a successful business. I'm not quite sure a lot of people do know whether it is successful or not, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are around that sort of definition.
I remember a discussion with my wife. We were struggling to pay the bills, which is a recurring theme for, I guess, a lot of people. My AirPod fell out.
Oh, good.
That's never happened before. Maybe it's too early for the AirPod. And we were wondering, how do we pay the insurance bill, the annual insurance bill for this month? And I told her, hey, look, the company is doing really well. My shares are worth millions. We're rich. And she said, well, that doesn't help because we don't have the 2000 needed to pay this bill. And I said, well, let's just wait a bit. And then all of a sudden, at some point later on, she didn't believe me. She knew that it was a hypothetical amount, but then at some point it turned into a real amount, just like well, Bezos or Musk, they have supposedly a lot of money, but the fact is they don't have the cash. They have it in shares in the companies, and of course, if it's publicly traded, you can see every day how much money you have, but it's actually real money. The challenge is that when you're starting a business, yeah, you might raise 5 million at a valuation of 20 million, and you can pretend your company is worth 20 million, but it's really not, because if you have 20% shares, that would in theory be worth 4 million, but you can never get that money out. You can never get those 4 million,
Mm.
because if you were to get that money out, the company would be done. So nobody's going to pay you that money. So it's not real
Yeah.
until one day it is. And at that point, that's when you know you made it. It's really that simple, when you can see the money on your bank.
Yeah, interesting. And fill people in on the couple of fundraisers, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, we raised 175 million from PSG, and just 5 months ago, we announced a record-breaking round of 365 million from General Atlantic, who is one of the best investors on the planet, and they invested, for example, in Airbnb, and that was at a valuation of 925 million. So not quite unicorn, but we've grown quite a bit since then. We're now 250 employees, and our growth is as strong as ever. It's I mean the market is growing, and the percentage of property managers that seek to use technology is still low, but it's increasing. So it means we can grow our business even if the short-term rental market stopped growing. There would still be the percentage of property managers that need technology is increasing.
Yeah, yeah,
But fortunately for us, the short-term rental market is growing.
yeah. So I've got so many questions. I do want to talk about the success thing before moving on to sort of the cap raises and how that works and how that looks and a bit of motivation around it. I think that It's interesting that you said that, being able to realize the value of everything that you've got, right? So obviously going to actually having the cash and being able to use it and to have the freedom that is now afforded to you through having that sort of financial lever. And I've seen a few people around me sort of kind of exit their business, or they're successful, they've made it, they've made really a lot of money, they've done very, very well out of it, which is great. And I think that's the success of a business, right? The business has been successful. Do you also think that that equates to you being successful as Marcus and who you are? Or, like, to me, I think there's way more than that from my observations.
Yeah, I think it's important for this is one of those things that's so much easier to say after the fact, but when you're starting a business, there's actually two kinds of success. One is for the business, and the other type of success is for the founder. And those don't always play out the same.
Mm,
There's a lot of I'll give an example from our industry. Booking.com, they sold their business for 100 million. Imagine that. They're worth over 100 billion now. But the founders, they sold it for 100 million,
mm,
just as an example. Sure, that's a lot of money, and I'm really happy for them. But you know, would you rather have 100 million or 100 billion?
sure.
That's a good question to ask. And a lot of founders have also diluted themselves by raising round and round after capital. So eventually, if there is a payout one day, they won't get that much. All the money will go to the investors. So and that's if the company is extremely successful. And I think the flip side of that is also there's a lot of founders that burn out. There's a lot of founders that have to quit because of a heart attack or a divorce or any other health problems, often induced by stress. In fact, I worked at a company where the founder they raised a big round, and the founder got into a coma for 2 weeks because of he got stress-induced diabetes, and that's a real risk, and that's also one where the founders success doesn't always align with the business success, because what good is money if you're dead?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So there's a real risk. I mean, starting a business is an extreme sport, and with that comes extreme risks as well. So navigating that, but also navigating to make sure that if there's some money at the end, will you get any part of it? That makes it worth it. That's really important. And then of course you got to build a successful business for any of that to even matter.
Yeah. Let's talk about the successful business side of things, because obviously we've talked about that metric of, hey, if it's not profitable, if it's not making money, then the business is dead regardless. Are there any other kind of factors that you would suggest to someone looking at, building their business, and say, hey, these are the things that you can really attribute to being successful, or to get towards that ultimate success, that are going to help to guide you along the way?
Yeah. There's at least two things that I think are important. One is that people tend to overcomplicate things. They quite often get into the how part rather than what part. So I get pitched a lot of new business models, and they say we're going to do this, but it's going to be different because this is how we're going to do it. And none of that really matters, to be honest, because the how part is just a technical detail. It's really small. What really matters is you got a customer and they have a problem. Can you solve it so that it delivers value to them? And can that value be reoccurring, like your Netflix subscription, or you're ordering stuff on Amazon, or you're using Uber? That value is reoccurring. You get value when you buy it once, but then if you buy it again, you get value again. So and a lot of people get caught up in this, oh, I gotta do it the perfect way, but they forget to talk with the customers. Start talking to 100 potential prospects, and then simply ask them, would you be willing to pay this much for me to solve you this problem?
Mm,
And if 100% of them say no, I would not be willing to pay, well, then it doesn't matter how you do it. Then it doesn't matter what technology you're using, or, how the solution is different, because nobody's willing to pay for it. You can build the best solution in the world, but if nobody's willing to pay for it, it's all for nothing. And so by talking to the customers, you can find out maybe there's a different problem that's even bigger than the one you thought. And maybe the solution can be even simpler than the one you thought before, because quite often it's a common fallacy that both business owners and employees do is when they have a big task ahead of them, they try on purpose to make it as complex as possible. Rather than starting with the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, let's do one thing today, then another thing, then another thing. They want to make a big project, and they want it to be big so that even if it fails, they can prove they did a lot of work. But all of that work is useless. What you really need is to start with one small thing, do it, and then do the next one, and then do the next one. You don't need a project plan there. Because if you spend all the time planning, you're not going to get anything done. And besides, maybe once you've planned the perfect 25 steps, and that can take you 3 months, after the first step, you find out that the entire thing you were thinking about is useless. So then you just spent 3 months planning and you built the first thing and you found out we made one wrong assumption here and it's not going to work. If you just had started with that one thing first rather than planning, then you would have found it out immediately. And then you can try something else, and something else, and something else. You got to constantly keep trying. The other thing that a lot of,
Yeah. But by the way,
you
before
know,
you go on, I really love it because it's absolutely true. And you find it time and time again in so many startups and even in bigger businesses where that's what they're doing. It's the whole failing fast thing, right? Is that you go, you try, you fail, great, and then you move on to the next task. What's interesting is you see these big corporates that get stuck and they stop failing fast and they stop changing and innovating and that sort of thing, and then they fall over along the way. But I completely agree with you, and it's how we run our business. And it's interesting when we don't do that and we're not just pushing that's a thing, but it's very uncomfortable. It really is uncomfortable to do it that way because you're going to fail, right? You're going to get hit in the face many, many times, and it's a lot of work to do it that way as well because it's messy, right? And you're picking things up along the way that you wouldn't have necessarily made mistakes on if you'd done it in another way, but you wouldn't have known whether it's going to be successful or not.
yeah, well, we really encourage at Hostaway people making mistakes, and we never punish people for mistakes if they try something new and it fails. But we do have one strict rule. If you make a mistake, you have to share what you learned. And maybe you didn't learn anything, but others can learn from that. And that's critical to it. The other part that really is important for success that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, they just don't understand these two factors and how they play into the whole thing. It's called luck and timing. So you need to have an incredible amount of luck, and it's important to recognize that you can't really impact the luck you're gonna have, but you need to level with yourself. You need to admit that it's not about one piece of luck. It's not like winning the lottery where either you win or you don't. It's about thousands of items where you either win or you lose. And the accumulative effort of all of that, of all the wins versus the losses, that is what is going to determine the success of the business. But it's very much dependent on luck. Where a lot of people get beaten down and they give up is when they did the right thing and it went wrong because of bad luck.
Hmm.
So it's very important early on to acknowledge that there's luck playing a factor here. Because if you don't, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think there's a lot of successful people that say, oh, I did this because of hard work. But actually, if you ask them, well, was luck a factor? They will say, oh, absolutely, of course. I mean, we got incredibly lucky. And the same thing with Hostaway. There were things that happened that weren't supposed to happen that were really good, but it was pure luck. The other part, though, timing, that's something that you can actually impact because you have to have a total addressable market. That's basically you look at the 8 billion people on the planet and you see how many of them could buy my solution, how many have this problem, and how many can buy it. And then you can further segment that down. Let's say you sell some really advanced solutions for bigger companies. Well, how many big companies are there? How many of them could buy this? How much money are they spending on this problem right now? And your problem solves it better. You should make those calculations because that's very much related to the timing part. because you got to be in the right place at the right time. If you now wanted to come out and introduce a unique smartwatch, well, the thing is, you're 10 years late. And yeah, technology, I think, is the number one example where there's a opportunity window when the door is open, when people can enter. Right now, if you want to enter AI, you can do it. Maybe 5 years from now, it's going to be incredibly hard. If you wanted to build a CRM for businesses to manage their sales process, the opportunity window closed about 20 years ago. That's when all the big players were already big. And today, if you want to introduce a CRM, it's just going to be ridiculously hard. Like, there's no way you can compete with Salesforce or HubSpot or Pipedrive. The only thing you can do is try to get some market share and hope that they buy you, but they're going to win either way. There's just, don't set yourself up for failure. Remember that luck and timing are going to be the two most, assuming you do everything else right. Like, you work hard, you focus on the customer, you build a good product, you provide good support, you have the money to fund operations. Still, luck and timing are going to be the most important parts there to determine the outcome.
How do you figure out the timing part? To me, I mean, for AI, it was awesome because I started playing around with it at the very, very beginning. Not at the very beginning. So I would say I was late to the party, but when ChatGPT started to release it more, sort of the average Joe could start to play with it immediately. I was like, oh, this is going to change everything, and I could see it very, very clearly. But sometimes like even how AI agents are now shaping up, and no one really talked about AI agents a year ago, and now it's this big thing, and there will be the next iterations of this technology as it improves and progresses. How do you know that, I like the idea of total addressable market, but how do you know that, I mean, like timing, I mean, it's part of the luck part, right? Like, or are there things that we can look at to make sure that we are at the right time with our products?
Yeah, I think there's there's one simple test you can do to see if the timing is right, and it's a bit similar to the stock market. If the driver is giving you stock market investment advice, probably it's not a good time to invest. But it goes the other way around. So if you're looking at an industry and you do a lot of research, like seriously a lot of research, factual and people's opinions, if you find out that the perception, and I'm assuming here that it's a business that exists. You maybe don't want to start a new business that doesn't exist, because that's infinitely harder. And you need way more luck than that. For example, uh, Nokia introduced their tablet in 2001, and it failed miserably because you couldn't make phone calls on it and it didn't fit in your pocket. It was a useless phone, but with a massive screen, and all you really could do was browse the internet. You could use a computer for that. But then Apple did the same thing 10 years later, and that was the right timing. That's why it's like you're probably better off going into a market where that somewhat exists. But the test you can do is, when you look at the facts of that market, are the people who either know or pretend to know about that market, do they have the wrong perceptions? And an easy way to do that is to go pitch to investors who are good at looking at different markets. That's one of the advantages with investors. They can draw parallels between your market and other markets. Do they have the wrong perceptions? And if they do, it's very likely means that the industry is on a verge of a breakthrough, because it means that there's a lot of companies in the space doing things wrong because they have the wrong perceptions. And that was the case for us. So, for example, back in 2015, when we spoke to investors, and just if you I even was out on the street polling people, asking, "Are you an Airbnb host?" The perception and the marketing campaign that Airbnb had was that it's people who are renting out their summer cottage, or they're renting out a spare
Mm.
bedroom in their city apartment, and they're just renting out this one place and making money on the side. That was the perception. And that perception was repeated by industry experts, it was repeated by investors. But reality was that Airbnb was making a lot more money on professional hosts, professional property managers that didn't manage one single bedroom, but
Mm.
rather 30. individual units. And that's how we knew that this industry is at the right stage, because there's the public perception, but there's also reality, and those two do not match. And
Fascinating.
so I'll give another example. So in 2011, I was very much into Bitcoin, and I was researching it, and then I was asking around, and nobody
I know
like
this
knew
story.
about it, and everyone had misperceptions of it. Like that was a great time to get into Bitcoin and just buy or mine or something. Just invest in Bitcoin in 2011 because nobody knew about it. Today, everyone knows about Bitcoin. So probably not a great place to be. Like if you want to start a business that's focused somehow on Bitcoin, not a good time, because the perceptions that people have are mostly true.
Yeah. It's I get the same thing with and bless his cotton socks, my barber. When my barber's talking to me about Bitcoin, I know there's time to to not be looking at it. I love it. Look, I'm conscious of our limited amount of time, Marcus, and there's quite a bit more that I do want to get into. You guys have raised lots of money, and I do want to go back to that. And I can really feel the sense of that you're already answering a lot of that, the luck and the timing, as well as all the other bits and pieces that you did. But before we go into that, one thing that fascinates me is this whole conversation. It really is based on the premise of thinking big. When you're talking about this, you're talking about total addressable market, right? Like that's the whole planet you're thinking of. Now you could break it down and look at your local market and go, well, that's my total addressable market. And still, it's going to be huge, right? And then now with technology, you don't even have to think about borders so much, and you can do so much more. It's just the psychology of thinking big, and how do you do it? Do you think about it consciously? How is it even possible for someone that might feel that they're not resourced enough to go as big as what you guys have done? What insights can you give us?
That's a great question, and actually, that's one of my common challenges. I get a lot of requests for mentoring. Hey, can you help me with my startup? And I tried to push them to think bigger, but they're just pushing back. They say, no, we're going to start with this one little thing. And I remember back in 2015 when this was still an idea. I was talking to a friend that I had met at a meetup for Airbnb hosts, and she was managing about 20 units, and she had plans to expand her business. And then I was telling about my idea, and she said, oh, wow, so you're going to make this really big. You're going to be a unicorn, and you're going to take over the whole world. And I hadn't thought about it that way at all.
Mm.
I said, well, that's not at all my intention. We just want to build a good product. But then I realized that that's that's just stupid. That's naive. If you are in any industry that you believe is going to be substantial or big, well, first of all, if you're in an industry that you don't believe in, you're not going to be able to build a business. If you don't think it's going to be a big industry, like electric vehicles 20 years ago, like if you don't believe in that, then you shouldn't be in it. It's that simple. But if you do believe in it, if you do believe that this industry you're in is going to be big, then you have two choices. You either become the market leader, the biggest one, the best one, the one that everyone knows, or you get eaten by the wolves, because that's exactly what's going to happen. And that comes in many shapes and forms. But the most common one is that you have a customer acquisition cost. It costs you something to acquire one customer, and then that customer, once they're acquired, they give you money one way or the other. But eventually, when someone else becomes the market leader, your customer acquisition cost will skyrocket. It will go so high that you simply cannot afford to get any more customers, because your marketing, your sales efforts will be so difficult that your company can never grow. And suddenly all you have is these customers, and one after one they leave for different reasons, but you can never get another new customer. So that's one way of getting eaten by the wolves. Another one is where you can get acquired, which for many founders that's a dream, to get acquired. But reality is, if you get acquired, usually, like, it's not the company acquiring you. They're only doing it if they can buy something that's really cheap and make a lot of money on it.
Mm.
And that's probably because you could have made that money if you wanted to, but you simply didn't acquire the skills or the experience or knowledge or the team or the resources needed to do that. But that was your job. That was your only job, was to gain that, to be able to get there. And the reason why you didn't manage to get those things is that you never thought you were going to be the global market leader. But if you have that mentality from the beginning that this is going to be this is a big industry today, it's going to be much bigger in the future, and I'm going to be the market leader, that is the only attitude that you can have in the long term to ensure success, because everything else will fail. And if you're thinking you're going to be local, well, the thing is, if you're in the technology business and you're going to be local, that it just doesn't work. We've seen in a lot of industries there's consolidations, and usually they're international. It's quite a common strategy to go and buy, the local version of eBay in let's say Hungary or something like that, and then in 25 other countries and consolidate that. Challenge is that whatever you're building, the technology, the marketing message, it's not the best. It's maybe the best in your market, but there's someone in a different market who's doing it way better. And they're going to get your business and they're going to make all the money with it. And you're going to miss out.
Why is it not okay just to build a business, get bought out for 10 million bucks and go and retire and get probably a pretty decent yacht, have
That's
holidays?
okay. And I know a lot of people have done it and they're extremely happy with their decision. The challenge there is that the odds of that happening, this is about luck. The odds of that happening are ridiculously small, because for acquiring these type of businesses, so just like there was a stage of confusion for an industry where realities are one thing but people's perception are different, and that's a good time to get in. There's also an opportunity window for consolidations. So let's say there was a time when big tech giants were buying social media networks, like Facebook bought WhatsApp for 3 billion, but that was back then. That's not today.
Hmm.
If you build a successful social media network, I don't think anyone's going to buy that. That's the thing. And the math that would make an exit like that work is only if your business has insufficiencies that you cannot fix, but somebody else has the recipe to fix that. In other words, you're running a bad business, but somebody else with more experience can turn it into a good business.
So are you suggesting to build your business to scale and live off the proceeds from that successful business rather than aiming to get out of the business because you're going to get a much better
No,
return
no,
on it?
not necessarily. It's just the mindset. If your mindset is, I'm going to build this small thing, and then hopefully someone big will come and buy it,
Mm.
you're going to be way worse off than if you go out from the beginning and say, I'm going to become the global world leader in this field. And then even if you fail, you might become a local leader and someone might buy you. But if you go in with the attitude that we're going to be just a local small player and have a small business, you're not going to get that 10 million exit ever,
Mm.
because your metrics in the business will not support the scalability. There won't be enough room for improvement for anyone else either, unless you set it up to scale and your mindset is you're going to take on the world.
Love it. I'm glad that I dug around, kept on digging and digging. It's great. I think it's rare to have founders think in that way. It's almost like that kind of abundance mindset, but it's a bit different, right? Like you're super focused on a particular goal, and it
Well,
is
it's
about being really good at what you do. Ultimately,
yeah, but it's super scary and intimidating. I mean, I don't judge these entrepreneurs who say, well, if I want to be the global leader, then there's a whole lot of things that I need to know that I don't know about. And that's completely fine. It's just that, yeah, it doesn't add up with the other goals. Like if you want a successful exit at some point, then yeah, you're gonna anyway have to learn about those things,
mm.
about how to hire a CFO or how to set up your legal structure. Like you anyway have to learn that, but then you're learning it from the loser's point of view, not from the winner's point of view.
when
So you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not trying to position yourself to be in a place where you can really be the market leader globally.
yeah. When you said you were talking about you having a conversation with the property manager who had the 20 properties, and she intimated that you're going to grow your business to scale, and you were thinking one way and then you switched, and that was a bit of a moment for you. How far into that journey were you with? It was with Hostaway, I take it.
That was in 2015, before we had our prototype, before we had any funding secured. I was just unemployed, making ideas. So quite early on, I would say. I was speaking to potential customers. That's one thing that I also see entrepreneurs. They put these mental roadblocks and they say, "Oh, but I can't speak to people who would buy my product because I don't have a product yet." And that's completely ridiculous, because you can always, like, whatever you do, eventually your business is going to have to get money from someone. Ideally, someone who gets something good in return, like your product. But if you don't start working on that sales process, everything else is lost. Like, you could build the best product in the world, that won't matter because nobody will buy it, because nobody will ever have heard about it.
Sure.
So you got to start by selling your idea, and you can even fake it. You can go to people and say, "Hey, I have built this product," and if they say, "Okay, show me," well, they'll say, "Okay, how much are you willing to pay?" And I'll show
Yeah.
you then. If they say, "No, no, I'm actually not willing to pay anything, I just wanted to
And
see it out of
yeah.
curiosity," then great, that's one data point. Move on and do that 100 times. If you find out 100 people are interested but not willing to pay anything, then probably it's not a good market to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the start of iBooked.Online. It was exactly the same story. Just actually literally talking to customers, picking up the phone, talking to them one by one, going out, visiting them. This is what we do. This is what it's going to look like. But of course, in the background, super nervous that we can deliver the product that we promised. But those conversations were crucial. And it was really heartening as well, because you would have people who say yes. And you're like, oh, amazing. This is great. Let's do it. So it drives you. Marcus, I do want to spend a little bit of time on the fundraise. You've done two of them, and then you've probably had previous ones. I want you to lead this part a little bit to see where you can add the most value for people in their journey, because of course I feel that it leads into this a bit in terms of being that number one player, that you need the funds to do it, right? Like, you'd already had a massive raise, very substantial, and you could have just kept it at that. But then you decided to go and do another one, which was even bigger. Which one was scarier?
I think the first one was way scarier because we didn't know what we were getting into. It's like the TV show Shark Tank. You go in there, they're experienced, you're not. You're doing this for the first time, and it's probably the only chance you'll ever get. Sometimes lose yourself. You only get one shot and do not miss a chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. So that was the attitude going in, and I spent so much time prepping for that. I actually took 5 months of work and well, off work. I joined meetings, but I wasn't proactively doing anything in the business. And instead, I focused fully on how to make this the most successful thing ever, because it was the most important thing I've ever done in my life. But then when it was time to do it again, turns out there wasn't much more for me to learn. So I didn't have to prep again. It's like, if you want to run your first marathon, you need a good 6 months of training for that. But then if you just keep running, you don't actually need to train for your second marathon, as long as you just keep doing what you're doing. And this was very much the same situation, where the second one was way easier. And it's actually, the irony is that a lot of entrepreneurs, they struggle with raising capital. I doubt if they need to raise capital in the first place, but then again, that comes from a place of privilege, where we managed to grow successful without raising anything
Coming for the
substantial.
guy that just raised massive amounts of capital.
Yeah, but I mean, we didn't raise it in order to become successful. We raised it because we were already successful.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's very different. We didn't go to investors and ask for money. Investors came to us and offered money. And we
Mm.
said, "Well, show us your cards." And turns out we found good matches.
That first one, you said you did a lot of prep for it, and like you said, it was already from a place of success, and you were afforded the time to do that preparation. What was the setup, and what was the plan that you were trying to execute?
I mean, honestly, we didn't know what we wanted, and we were very transparent with the investors as well. Basically, we told them surprise us because we didn't know. There were many options on the table. I mean, was the option to sell the business and move on. There was the option to take on VC type funding. They buy a small share of the company, and there was everything in between. And we didn't know what we wanted because all we had were some investors coming in and offering us shiny objects. And
Mm.
so we thought, okay, let's be systematic. Let's talk to 100 of them, and then let's narrow it down. And let's talk further with 20 of them, and let's narrow it down and talk in depth and with 5 of them. And that's exactly what we did. And it turns out that other than the money and the deal structure, which has some impact, most importantly, it's about finding the right type of dynamic with the investor, because that's where I see a lot of companies also fail. They go out and raise the big one, and then everything turns to hell. And that was one of the things that I found out in my research, was that you need to choose your partners so extremely well. I actually spoke to the CEO of Supercell. They're the guys behind Brawl Stars, Clash of Clans, and other
Mm.
successful
Yeah,
mobile
yeah, yeah,
games.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they sold 50% of their business to Tencent for 4.1 billion, which in Finland, which is a small country, that's a lot of money. Like that's 4,100 million in a country of 5 million people. That's a lot. But he sold his first company, or he sold the majority of it to a publicly traded company earlier, and they got a good amount. They got like I don't know, let's say 200 million shared among many founders. But then they didn't get it as cash; they got it as stocks, and it was for a publicly traded company, and they could only sell the shares after, I think it was, let's say, 1 year. And in that 1 year, 90% of the valuation got lost on the stock market. So suddenly their 200 million deal that they were celebrating, turns out it was only 20. And then when you start dividing that among many founders, suddenly there's not much money left. I mean, you have the big ticket there, the 200. Yeah, they made that deal, but they never saw any of that money, nothing, because they chose the wrong partner. So that was, and I've heard many horror stories of investors that come in with certain ideas on how to run the business, and we just wanted to make sure we found a good investor, and that's what we focused the most of the effort on. And then everything else sort of fell in place after that. Valuation and terms and things like that don't really matter that much in the big picture, because if you got the good synergies, then the
Will
other
figure
things
itself
can
out.
work.
So, and that was the first one. So, from that prep part, and you said that you spent so much time. So, to me, it sounds like it was the prep for the final signatures almost, and the prep was doing all your research, finding things out about how to structure things in your and understanding your investors and how it all fits together. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's
Because I mean,
actually.
sorry, interrupt. I should have finished the question, but when you said prep, in my mind, it's like putting together pitch decks, and it wasn't that, was it?
No, and actually, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time preparing for not necessarily for even an investment, but they want to make sure they have their legal compliance. They want to make sure they pay all the taxes. They want to make sure they follow every labor law everywhere on the planet, and they spend too much time preparing this, which is great, except that that comes at a loss to the business, because every moment you spend on learning the labor laws of some province in Canada or some region in France, that's a moment away from delivering value to your customers. And the thing is, no matter how well you do it, when you get to the big league, you anyway did it wrong. So all that
Mm.
effort was lost. And we found out, like, just a bunch of people that we relied on, like lawyers and accountants, they did things wrong. And our new investors told us, hey, this is shit. So my point is, no matter how well you set up everything to be successful, probably at the scale that you're at, you're not going to get it right anyway. So you might as well deprioritize it and admit that it's not going to be perfect. I think another example is hiring employees. It took me many years to realize that when you're a startup that has a very small chance of success, and like all startups have a very small chance of success, and you're not even a big brand and you're not profitable, you haven't done any major races, the amount of people that would work for you is just not the same. There's a certain amount of daredevils that have joined us that have done tremendous work, but those are really hard to find. They're like a diamond. It's really hard to find them, and we were very fortunate to have them. But once we got all this publicity from the funding, we realized, oh, there's this whole other pool of people that are willing to work for us that actually know what they're doing. They've done this before. They're very professional. They're very efficient. And we never even realized that we didn't have access to those people before until
Mm.
suddenly they started coming in. And now we saw, oh, here's the real talent pool.
Well,
And
this is
it's,
so much easier.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's insane, and it's the same thing with corporate governance. Like you can spend all your time on structuring for taxes or yeah, labor laws and all, anything you want, and then it turns out, yeah, but because you weren't in the big leagues, you didn't get access to the best tools, so you anyway did it wrong.
Okay, so going back to the prep stuff. So you said that you spend that time prepping. So obviously, it wasn't doing pitch decks, and it was that doing the research on your potential partners. Is that right?
No, no, it was more broader than that. It was reading, listening to audiobooks, lots of books about how to build a business, how to get investments, how to sell a business. Then I spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs trying to find people who had either got big investments or had sold their business or merged with other businesses to just learn their stories. And I was trying to, it was like I was entering a new market. In 2015, I knew nothing about short term rentals and vacation rentals, and I had to learn everything. And I learned everything, but it was a 9 month long project where I focused only on learning. I spoke to anyone who agreed to speak to me, and I started to see patterns that, hey, this guy is saying the same thing that the other guy said, so maybe others think the same way. And I was doing the same thing here. I was walking through all these deals, reached out to anyone who wanted to talk to me, but I was learning essentially a completely new market, a market of investing in or buying or selling businesses, which was a market I had no experience in. And I didn't want to go into this process not having all the knowledge I could have. And I think for me at that stage, 5 months, it was a great investment. I learned a lot of examples of where things went wrong, and I knew how to look out for the signs for that. And we had a chance of failing miserably as well in this round, but we didn't.
Sure, sure. I mean, even that first round, it was sizable for such an early. Like normally, it's all stages, right? And then you're getting more and more and more. And I think that statistically, you guys would have probably raised more than you maybe should have.
I mean,
I
yes
mean,
and
when I
no.
when I say should have, not that I'm not criticizing the value of your business. Please don't get that wrong. I'm saying that had you not been as educated, you may not have been able to derive that value and show that value to potential investors. Is what I'm getting at.
Exactly, but it's also worth keeping in mind that we could have raised, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million before that, and then we would have ended up in the same place. We would
Mm,
have been able to get these big tickets. It was just that we decided to build the company in a way so that we didn't have to go through those rounds. Because once again, any time you spend with an investor trying to secure a 10 million investment, that's time away from focusing on delivering value to your customers. And we didn't want to do that. But it wasn't just about the customers, it was also selfish. We saw a lot of examples. And that's one thing that I learned, that a lot of founders, they have to raise round after round, and at some point they have a lot of obligations to the investors, but they have no shares left in their own business, so their incentive to actually do a good job is very low, and they're very demotivated, and everything is owned by the investors, and we didn't want that. We wanted our business, not the investors business. So that's why we waited, and we got, a similar outcome, but with much bigger tickets, just by waiting.
That whole little part there just makes me so angry at the TV shows that you see where they've got investors going on there and asking for 50% of the business and that sort of thing, and it's just kind of, and it's actually teaching that that's an okay thing to do. So
Yeah, well,
which is awful.
one thing I learned, especially about the VC climate, for example, one book I read was purely focused on how VCs operate, and it was quite a big book, 600 pages. And I learned that a lot of the so-called startup culture, as we know it, whether it's blogs, whether it's TED Talks, whether it's events, people being on stage, a lot of that is set up and sponsored by VCs to make sure that they can push their agenda. Because the worst thing that can happen for a VC is something like, I don't know, I can't come up with a better example, but a bootstrap business that like Pornhub. You build something and then one day it's worth 500 million and then you sell it. Like the VCs don't make any money on that.
Hmm.
So they need to make sure you understand that you can never do that unless you have 10 million, unless you have 5 million, unless you have 100 million. You can never achieve that.
Hmm.
And that's why all of the startup scene is based on essentially fundraising, and companies even celebrate when they raise rounds. To some extent they should be, it shouldn't be celebrated because it's a win for the investor. After all, if the investor is making a deal where they're not winning, then why would they do it? They're not in the, like, they're funded by rich people. Rich people got rich because they make money. They don't get rich by losing money.
That's so funny. That's so funny. I reckon that's probably the quote of the episode, Marcus.
Yeah, so I'm not complaining about. I mean, there is the part where a transaction simply makes sense. Like, let's say you have a great market, and the only thing that's really missing to be successful is $10 million, but you don't have 10 million, and then a VC comes in and says, "I can give you that if you give me 30% of the company." That makes total sense. Like, absolutely 100%, you should do it. But what I'm criticizing here is the whole culture of startups where it seems the only objective is to raise capital and the customer doesn't matter, because that's just like, at these startup events nobody ever talks about the customer, and that's the only thing that matters to me is the customer. And actually, even more than the customer, I care about the value that we can deliver. That's really important to me. That's because that's scientific.
Hmm.
That's something that I can measure. I like things that I can measure. I can measure exactly how much value a customer is getting, and that's important.
I love it. I
But
love it.
that's not something VCs are interested in.
Look, I'm gonna wrap us up, but I am gonna, before I do, and this is, I'm telling you what, 'cause this is the longest episode I've actually ever recorded. It's thrilling. I'm absolutely fascinated by this journey and this story, and I'm so grateful for your insights. The latest round that you did, like you said, it's substantial. Um, and of course it's from a place of not having to do it. You don't have to do, you could have, you still be successful, still growing. What are some of the key drivers towards pushing for that round and, kind of working into the future? What are your thoughts?
I had an itch back in 2022. I thought we were the clear winner, that we were the market leader, but it turns out nobody agreed with me because most people hadn't heard about us. And that was one of the key drivers to that 175 million. We wanted to make sure that we could be seen as a viable player, as a major player in the industry. But I just didn't see any way to get it without, putting a number out there like 175 million. And that changed everything for us. Our business started growing really well after that, partly because of the reputation. People took us seriously. But I noticed that there was a subsegment of the industry that still didn't think we were anything, because we were the new kids on the block. We were the two guys working in a garage and trying to put something together, but it's not really working. When in fact, we had more customers than anyone else in the space already. And this was one of the main drivers why we wanted to do this second round. And specifically, we wanted to do it at a higher valuation than anyone else. So that it's like sometimes you do these things just to prove to yourself that you can do it. Like I ran my first marathon last year, and I don't have to run a marathon. I don't have to, but I wanted to prove myself that I can run a marathon, and I wanted to prove to the market that don't listen to me say that we're the biggest and we're the best, but don't listen to me. Look at the money. The money thinks that we are the most valuable business outside of the OTAs in the entire industry at this valuation, and that's why we went for this second round to make sure that we could accomplish that, so that it's undisputable, so that there's facts that show that we are actually the most valuable company.
It's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. I've learned so much from this episode. I think thinking big is incredibly important and something that definitely getting from you. I love your philosophy around delivering value to your customers. And I think that if I was to give advice to anyone that's starting up and if they're like, oh, I want to get into AI stuff, just think about your customer and how you can give them value in the work that you do. And you're just going to boom overnight. It's just be such a quick success story. And you're like, oh, how did that happen? Actually, we start to do something that really made a big impact for people. And it's not hard to do with those tools. I'm also what's also become obvious is how much you value education and learning from others. You're not in this on your own, and you're using books and you're using other resources to get yourself prepared for different parts of your life and your journey. So that's really cool, Marcus. I am going to wrap us up, but as we do, is there any final tips or thoughts um, that you might give someone or about the industry? Just something that you think could be really useful to people that are listening.
Yeah, we actually raised an angel round with around 8 people who were all accomplished business people, meaning that they didn't necessarily they hadn't necessarily built a SaaS startup. Oh, it fell out again.
Okay.
But they had built other successful businesses. And over the years, we used to meet over beers, and they asked us questions, asked about our challenges, and in hindsight, what really struck out is that the comments that we didn't want to hear, the questions that we didn't want to ask, those were the most important ones. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're getting help from someone, because people want to help, people are nice, especially if they have an interest in you succeeding. If they ask you questions that make you uncomfortable, don't get defensive. Just ignore the question, but focus on that question. Don't focus on the ones that make you feel good, because those are useless. Or maybe it's a big problem that you have already figured out, but there might be another big problem that you didn't figure out or you didn't even know existed. And that's why these questions make you so uncomfortable. And you have to deal with them, because if you don't deal with them early on, they're going to come and bite you in the ass later on. It's guaranteed, because people that have built multiple businesses and seen others build multiple businesses, it's the same issues that happen in every business. And it's easy to see that coming if you've done it before, but no first time founders have ever done anything before, at least not at this scale. So it's really important to just recognize that whenever you feel angry about a comment or question, especially when talking to investors, because investors are usually idiots, and they'll give really useless opinions that make you infuriated. But there's some truth to that. Don't focus on the nice part when the investor says, wow, congratulations for your success, what a great idea, this is a big market, you can make it big. Yeah, that's irrelevant. What is really relevant is that one comment that pisses you off. Focus on that, think about it, do research about it, figure out how did other companies solve that problem, because those are the important ones. It's always the uncomfortable things that are going to make you successful, not the comfortable ones.
And the question is, why did it piss you off, right?
Yeah, exactly. Probably because you don't know that there. And actually, I know why it makes you angry. It's because there's an implication that there's a whole world of knowledge in an area that you either hate. Maybe it's accounting, or maybe it's legal, or strategy, or something like that, or even programming. Maybe you don't know programming and you need to solve a programming problem. that's that's a challenge. but there's an implication that there's a whole world of knowledge out there, and you are outside of it. And to even get inside is a massive undertaking that you simply don't have time. That's why your brain tells you, this person is wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. No, but you got to get in there. You got to get in there one way or the other. And if you can't afford to hire the right people, which is often the case with startups, because it's not about the salary, it's about the talent pool that you get access to. You might just have to learn it yourself. And that's what I did a lot of times. I went into the uncomfortable zones, I learned things myself, and I believe that that's really important for any business. But it requires a massive personal sacrifice and humility to be able to do that.
Yeah. Being ready to accept that you don't know everything. Look,
Yes.
on that note, I am going to close us off. Folks, thank you so much for watching this episode or listening to it on the podcast. So you'll be on iTunes or Spotify. If you're on iTunes, leave us a review. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the topics that we've covered. If you're on YouTube, there's a subscribe button below. If you can smash that for me, do the likes and all that kind of thing, it does make a huge difference. And it allows me to interview incredible people like Marcus that have some really great insights and stories for us. Mr. Rader, thank you so much. We will include links to Hostaway. I'm sure that if anyone wants to catch up with Marcus and jump onto his LinkedIn, say hello. And Marcus, hopefully we can drag you out to Australia. Otherwise, I'll see you at Hostella or at VRMA, one or the other.
Absolutely. I'm currently negotiating with my wife on how we're going to make it to Australia because it's a long trip.
I'll make it worth your while. All right, take care.
Yeah, thank you very much.